Reality, there are different levels of trust, not one size fits all. Think about this. The trust needed for a prospect to agree to meet is very different than the trust needed for them to answer your questions with honesty and vulnerability. And yet, both are still different than the trust needed for your prospect to be willing to confront the uncertainty and the risk of making a change decision. So building some real trust out of the gate is really important. And talking about the weather or your kids' shared experiences on the soccer field isn't going to move the needle unless you're okay and you're good with that feel-good multi-year sales cycle. I don't think any of us are. That's because we innately and naturally hold people at a distance until we understand their full intent. And it's why telling prospects that you don't need anything from them and that they don't need to do anything different with you is very acceptable and important. Letting your prospect off the hook actually increases your chances of having a truly open, honest dialogue and possibly moving the change needle. In this episode, Pam and I break down how this important shift in approach works. Think about it. While all of your competition is asking your prospects for time and effort so they can sell something, you're telling your prospects something different. You're telling them you're fine, you're good, you don't need anything. Who do you think will sound more objective and credible? Here's a question to think about. What would happen if your prospect thought of you as their peer, not a salesperson? Listen in and let's find out. Pam, have you ever noticed, and for our listeners, as many of you know, we do a lot of role plays and we do a lot of film study across the country. So we get to hear a lot of live conversations and obviously through role play as well. Pam, have you ever noticed when it comes to setting the tone and trying to build trust with that prospect early and how we always talk about give the out? Have you ever noticed it's so difficult for people to give it? Or when they do give it?
Yeah. I've noticed a couple things.
Or when they do. So for our listeners, if you remember, and this is not necessarily just a Lapa 180 component, this is psychology. When you meet with someone for the first time, there is that innate psychology that we always hold people at a distance because we don't know what their intent is and we don't trust their intent. Even referrals will do that. It's innate. And so the best thing that any one of us can do when we first talk to someone is try to set the tone in a way that tells them, hey, don't need anything here. And for those of you on this listening right now who say, yeah, but Dan, Pam, I do want something, man, just keep wanting it. Keep doing it. Your results are going to be your results. And you've convinced yourself something that's completely against human psychology. So for those of you who say, yeah, but Dan, I know I want something. The prospect knows I want something. Fine, you'll hit your 15, 20% success rate, but you will never experience exponential accelerated growth because the key to having a conversation with another human being where you're going to do a deep dive on what might be best for them or what they're doing, or you want them to be honest and vulnerable with you, the damn key to all of it is to let them know immediately you don't need anything from them. So continue to tell yourself that you do need something and that they know you need something. That's fine. Okay.
Well, and you and I both know the problem with that too. You know, this is the abundance, folks, part of the mindset that we coach. Abundance. Everything will be okay no matter what happens in this conversation today. The problem is we convince ourselves, me included, okay, well, when I have enough success, then I'll tap into abundance. But right now I don't. And I'm massively scarce, so I'm sorry. And what you have to remind yourself, it doesn't matter how successful you become. If you don't practice how to tap into that abundance now, you never will. You never will. I think it gets harder as we get more successful to tap into abundance versus easier. And I am the person. I remember sitting down with one of my first bosses, Randy McNutt, and telling him, okay, got it. But right now I have zero. So once I get some sales under me, I'll start doing this stuff. And it's completely the opposite. Completely the opposite. You don't do it now, you're probably never going to do it.
My story goes along with that, as you know, where I went almost 2 years with no revenue, no clients, no nothing, no plan B, 2 months from probably filing bankruptcy. And that's when I had to tap into abundance the most. And I did. And I still credit to this day of how that pulled me out of that cycle or that situation where I was not tasting success. I was like 0 for 13, 0 for 14 on trying to land my first client. It was bad, but I kept thinking about still all the little things that were going well in my life and writing them down. So I wouldn't focus so much on how I messed this one up, how I messed that one up, how this didn't happen, how luck made that didn't happen, or giving all these excuses or any of the woe is me and all that can set in. I purposely doubled down on the gratitude and the abundance and always thinking about the little things because I didn't want my energy and my mindset to go toward all of the perceived what wasn't happening in my life. So I don't want to hear from anybody that you can't tap into abundance until you start to win. You got it all wrong. That's not how it works.
And boy, you see it, Dan. You see it when people don't learn how to do it early and they do have a level of success. That ego takes over and they continue to feed scarcity because they feel like they have to prove to everyone that they can continue to be good. I see it all the time. All the time.
One of the things I was going to share is this. You have to let the other human being know that you don't need anything from them in some shape, form, or fashion. What that tells the other human being is that there's a strong chance you're going to be objective. When you say to yourself, they know what I want. They know I want to advance a sale. They know I want to make a sale. You're telling yourself, and you're most importantly telling the other human being, you will not be objective on their part. So unless they already have put themselves in a spot where they are deciding on change, if they are deciding on change, you can get away with that. You can get away with it. But if they're not, or they haven't decided on change, which we all know 80% plus or so of the marketplace hasn't, based on years of research, you have to be objective. You have to tell the other person in your own way, I don't need anything. Nothing has to come from today. The trust factor that creates out of the gate is pretty powerful. So like when we do the role plays, Pam, sometimes in these different groups, as you know, that we have, when we say, okay, how are you going to start your meeting? How are you going to set the tone? What out? They'll do really well up to the point where they'll say, and oh, by the way, when we're at the end of the meeting today, we can decide if partnering makes sense, if we're a good fit. And it's like, and what? Or not.
Or not. You may not do.
We may not be a good fit. It's like anything, Pam, right? You're very savvy. Someone sits with you and says, Pam, listen, I know we got a half an hour. I really like to learn about your coaching journey. All right. When and if appropriate, Pam, I'd be happy to share a little bit about my journey or what we do. All right. And we both know, Pam, at the end of the 30 minutes, you and I are probably going to have to make a decision. Do we want to continue to explore or not? Pam, I want you to know, and this may seem obvious, not exploring is an option and it might make sense.
Much different. Yep.
Are you okay with that, Pam? What did I just tell you, Pam, in that quick 30 seconds?
That you have no expectations from me in this today, and you're not going to try to hunt me down, chase me, get me to do something I'm not ready to do, make me feel pressure that I'm not ready to feel. 100%.
And then so when I start asking questions, do you think it has a little bit of an impact on your honesty?
Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. And remember, folks, you do want me to be able to speak my truth, what's in my head, like the things that really are on my mind. And if you don't do a good job of that upfront agreement, bring my guard down, allow me to truly believe that you are not here to serve your own self-interest, you betcha I will most likely be a lot more honest with you. But Dan, to your point, I do think subconsciously, though, we pay attention to the questions that are asked, how they're asked. Subconsciously, I'm going to still be saying to myself, well, let's see if this experience continues. Does he or she really mean it? Because you know subconsciously you're still trying to pick up on those scarce, low intent, attached signs throughout the conversation. So the upfront agreement should set the tone, but boy, you better follow it with substantial demonstrations that I meant what I said. I meant what I said when we started this conversation, and you're going to feel it in this entire 30 minutes.
Yeah. And for those who are listening, you've heard me say this on past episodes. I'll say it again. Try it on your kids, especially if they're older.
Amen to that.
When you have to sit them down and give them some parental advice, give them an out. Watch how it changes the interaction. Just tell them, hey, listen, we need to talk about X, but I understand at the end of our conversation, you're still going to be the one that gets to decide what you do and how you handle that situation. I understand that. That's going to be up to you. And watch how it does change the interaction between you and them.
For sure.
You can't do it with your spouse, because the second you try to do it with your spouse is going to know what you're up to.
Oh, yeah. Jeff, that's been up for a long time. He knows. He knows.
But again, it's not a sales tactic. It's a human nature conversational strategy. Learn how to give the other person the out, and it will change the dynamic of how they listen to you and the honesty that they're willing to invest into the conversation with you. Again, just start with your kids if you want. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
It's great practice.
As we wrap up today, I want you to consider something. Where in your life could you create more trust by giving people permission to say no? Whether it's with a prospect, a team member, or your own children, remember, the moment you let go of needing a specific outcome is often the moment people become more open with you. The psychology is clear. People hold back when they sense that you have an agenda. But when you communicate that it's genuinely okay if nothing changes or nothing happens, you create space for real honesty and vulnerability. And here's what's fascinating. That honesty and vulnerability are exactly what lead to deeper trust and better outcomes. Try it this week. Start with one conversation where you explicitly give the other person an out. Notice how it will change the dynamic. Keep in mind that you have this mindset in you. You simply have never learned to let it out.